Welcome to the Pretty Tough Podcast. I'm your host, Hailey Corona, and today we're going to be diving into the topic of nutrition. And I'm so excited because wrestling is revolving around weight, and a lot of times we focus on the number on the scale instead of properly fueling our bodies and creating lifetime habits that are going to give us really great health. So the guest that I have on today, I'm so excited about. She is a performance nutrition coach, and she is fantastic. She works alongside Wrestle Like a Girl, and she is passionate about advocating for athletes, parents, and coaches learning about the female body and how to properly fuel. So I'm so excited to chat with her and pick her brain. Welcome to the podcast, Erin Sparrold.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to have an opportunity to help educate and empower young women.
Oh, I love it. I'm just so excited. I have so many questions because this is a topic that so many people need more education
Mhm.
on. So, just kind of diving right into it, I want to know how you got involved with nutrition and specifically in wrestling.
Oh, it's a long journey. I'm not young, so I started this journey a long time ago. I was an athlete myself.
Wow.
Growing up, I grew up in Arizona. Because I grew up in Arizona, on the surface of the sun, my sport of choice was swimming, so I could stay in the
Nice.
water and out of the sun.
Yeah.
And often, my coaches would be like, "Oh, eat this before competition. Don't eat this." And it just kind of sparked a curiosity in me. And of course, being a child of the 80s, and my family, my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, they were always on some new diet. So there was always
Mm,
this language around food.
right.
But because I was also an athlete, the language around food started to overlay with
Mm,
performance. And
mm-hmm.
I was curious. I was like, okay, well, why? What, how should I be fueling myself? What should I be doing? So I studied, followed that curiosity to the University of Arizona, where I studied nutrition science. And how I got into wrestling, I eventually moved out to Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and it's such a wrestling hub in northeastern Pennsylvania. I started getting more and more and more questions, and the nutrition and the science of the nutrition around wrestling at the time was really cultural and in its infancy, not so much science backed.
Right.
And I just got really, really curious. Like, okay, there's some problems here, and I got very curious about how to start solving those problems and what I
Mm,
could do to support my athletes. And then I was introduced to Coach Pat Santoro, and he brought me in to start working with the team and that whole coaching staff there, the medical sports med staff, everybody, they're so fantastic. And they brought me in and they really educated me and helped me understand some of the intricacies of the sport. And then I took my nutrition science background and started to try some things out and problem solve. So that's how I got into wrestling. Was
wow.
I was willing to try and problem solve some different
Yeah.
and challenging problems and work with the teams and come up some solid learning curves, because there really wasn't a lot of information available to
Right.
practitioners because it's such a unique and different sport. We do the
Yeah.
opposite with wrestlers that
Yeah.
we do with every other
Seriously.
athlete. So
Wow.
it just took some time to figure that out, and it was really fun. And then evolving into working with female wrestlers,
Mm-hmm.
for a while I was like, God, you put me here. There's a reason
Right.
I'm working with wrestlers. Like, I'm an endurance athlete, triathlete, swimmer. Like, I'm
Wow.
learning all this
Incredible.
cool stuff.
Yeah.
But why? Why am I
Right.
working with wrestlers?
Right.
I liked it. But then the explosion of women's wrestling,
Yeah.
and that piece, I was like, okay, God, I get it now. I get it. You were preparing me for this,
Wow.
because learning what I needed to learn about the intricacies of the sport, but then also being a female athlete myself, having lived in a female body,
Right.
managing all the differences and the things with my body, and then being able to take and apply all of that to women's wrestling while it's exploding,
Yeah.
so that we're developing good practices to
Yes.
support the health and well-being of these young women who want to try the sport or who are further advanced in the sport. So yeah, it's been a long journey to get to here, but looking back, I
Wow.
can see all the little things that God was doing that I was like, what? Okay, I'll do
Yeah.
this.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. That's so cool. And God seriously works in such amazing ways where,
Hmm.
things that might seem like random or coincidences, it's like, no, God is truly working in our lives. And I think
Yep.
that's amazing that you number one got to go to Pennsylvania, that is such a wrestling mecca, and then that you were willing to just kind of dive into wrestling because it is so different different than other sports, and it's
Mhm.
seriously backwards probably than what other, sports teach and
Yeah.
recommend. And so I love that you, as a female yourself, are willing to dive in and learn more when we need people like you doing that. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Number one, that's incredible. And I want to know kind of, you mentioned some things, that are backwards ways of thinking. And so I want to know, what are maybe the biggest things that girl wrestlers that you're working with, what are some myths that they're like, no, this is the correct nutrition way to go? Or, what are some of those
Yeah.
biggest myths that we have in wrestling?
I think that, well, the biggest one is the intense fuel and food restriction. And we're seeing
Yeah.
this change. We're seeing it change with the male athletes as well. They're not cutting quite as intensely with their food. We're manipulating a little bit more water, fiber weight, things like that, rather than
Yeah.
extreme food restrictions. We're fueling athletes a little bit more going in. There's a lot more science to making the weight descents. But unfortunately, there's still that culture of just don't eat, just don't eat,
Right.
just don't drink. And that's, I mean, obviously we have to make weight, so that's something different. My soccer players, I get to hydrate them up and load them up with carbohydrates before I send them
Sure.
out onto the field, but they don't have to step onto a scale to be able to step on the pitch.
Right.
So it's a different ball game. So we have to be respectful of the weights. We have to be respectful of the weight certifications. But a lot of times the athletes tend to get anxious because they don't know how much they actually can eat and drink, and for how long they can eat and drink a good volume of food and still be able to make weight. They tend to get anxious, so they over restrict too far out,
Yeah.
which at the end of the day, which we're learning again, sports science is evolving and nutrition science is evolving rapidly in this area.
Mm-hmm.
But we're learning that, okay, you might make weight, but you're not going to compete well because you have way over impaired your fuel and your hydration. You can't recover that quickly enough to compete well. We've learned that in the male sphere. The challenge with the female sphere is that they're even more sensitive
Yeah.
physiologically to weight adjustments and energy depletion. So we have to, what we've kind of figured out through trial and error and now a little bit more input from science, what works for men
Yeah.
doesn't work the same for women. So
Yeah.
we have to step into this in, okay, now we've kind of got this outline, but let's apply it to female physiology.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's so interesting because I think that it's so hard when what we do have is previously based on just, males, and we have a lot of male
Mhm,
coaches that are helping to give back to the sport, which is
mhm,
fantastic.
mhm.
But a lot of times there's just not quite an understanding of how women's bodies work differently.
Yeah.
And even myself, I've been a girls wrestling coach for the past couple of years, and
Mhm,
myself having, not a full understanding of, how the body works and how, menstrual cycles play into things,
mhm,
and how
mhm.
it's different. So, what would be some big things that you would say, in regard to like menstrual cycles and how women and girls should be going about fueling their bodies and weight cutting, like, or weight
Mhm,
management more
mhm,
so?
mhm.
What would be your advice for them?
Well, first of all, tremendous amounts of empathy to the coaches because
Yeah.
they're trying to problem solve and understand and learn quickly as the sport is growing so fast. And a lot of these
Right.
coaches are managing huge rosters with male and female teams, and they're trying to learn and huge amounts of empathy and credit because I have a lot of coaches reaching out to me, a lot of coaches. I work with the National Wrestling Coaches Association,
Yep.
a lot of coaches that reach out to me like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. What's wrong? How do I do this differently? And I've unfortunately, on the flip of that too, had some female athletes report that coaches shame them because the coaches don't understand
Shoot. Yeah.
how different our bodies really can be. We really
Right.
can go to bed and wake up heavier during some
Yeah.
phases of our cycle.
Right.
So it's not like so it's not like the athlete downed a pizza and then went to bed. That's not what's happening. Her
Yeah.
kidneys literally changed functioning, so her
Wow.
body's doing something differently.
Yeah.
So with female physiology, the way we have to approach this a little bit differently, first of all, is weight management. And the
Mm-hmm.
first most important step is you have to choose a smart weight class.
Mm,
Um, females in general, don't adjust weight in as linear of a fashion or as rapid as male athletes do. So if you have a female athlete who's walking into your room and you're like, hey, we want to certify you at, 10 pounds lighter than you're walking around at right now. Can you do that in 2 weeks? She probably can't.
right.
Where a male athlete probably could do that within a week, week and a half. So
Sure.
we have to choose smart weight classes to start with. It has to happen. Secondly, we have to allow, if we do want a female athlete to adjust weight, we have got to allow more time
Mm.
for that descent. It's not going to happen as quickly. Our cycle disrupts some of that descent. So we absolutely have to allow more time. And we cannot operate in as low of a calorie deficit as male athletes can. So we can't go to the same extremes without having a negative backlash faster. So choosing a smart weight class is really important.
Hmm.
Allowing time for a healthy descent is really, really important as well. I would say those are the biggest pieces. And then when it comes to a competition weight descent and having to make weight for competition, really, like my male athletes, I feel comfortable keeping them walking around at 5% up from their scratch weight.
Sure.
But my female athletes, we can't really go more than 2%
Wow. Okay.
because we don't move water off of our bodies the same way male athletes do. Our sweat rate is different during different phases of our cycle. Our kidneys function differently, so we hold more sodium. So we actually really struggle to get rid of water during certain
Interesting.
phases of our cycle. I think every woman's experienced this. Like all of a sudden, like you step on a scale and you're 3 pounds heavier than you were the day before. You're like,
It's
what
like, what
happened?
the heck?
Yeah, 1,000% can guarantee you did not just gain 3 pounds of fat
Yeah,
mass. Your body
seriously.
is holding a bunch of extra water and it's not going to let it go very easily because our
Mm.
hormones are impacting how our kidneys work. And it also
Wow.
impacts our sweat rate. So we can't sweat it out as easily. We can't pee it out as easily. So if a woman is having to go into competition during this tricky phase of her cycle and she's sitting up too high, getting her weight down is going to be really hard to do. And she's
Yeah.
probably going to, not probably, most likely to make a bigger 5% weight descent. She's probably going to impair her performance and really struggle to make weight. So my encouragement is always no more than 2% up from, especially in dual season when you don't have a lot of time between
Right.
matches.
Yep.
If you have more time, like some of my girls, my high school girls are descending right now for Fargo, so we've got lots of time. Then that's a different story. But when you're in dual season and you have to make weight repetitively week after week after week, we have to stay 2% up, no more. I'm seeing a lot of my really high performing female wrestlers actually choosing to walk at weight. They're not
Wow.
descending at all. Now, some
I
girls
love that.
have to just because, the lighter weights tend to have a more difficult time, like the mid to high weights. They're not cutting at all,
Wow.
which is
That's
really awesome. And I
incredible.
think yeah, it's a cool culture shift.
Yeah, that seriously is because I think it's so hard. Looking back on my wrestling career a little bit, I started when I was really young, and at the time it was mainly with boys. And so my parents just not having a huge, idea of, I mean, they were brand new to it. I was brand new to
Yeah.
it. The idea was if I could be smaller, it would help to kind of minimize the strength difference between me and boys. And
Mm-hmm.
so I spent, at a very young age starting to cut weight in a
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy manner just because
Mm-hmm.
again we didn't know and it just that's kind of how it went. And so for years
Yeah.
just kind of this yo-yo effect of up and down with my weight created really bad habits with me and food, and actually ended up
Sorry.
turning into a little bit of some eating disorders that I've now
Mm-hmm.
since got a handle on, healthy habits and a lot better things. But I see that a lot
Good.
in girl athletes that even girls that I've coached that just when they start seeing a number on the scale and start managing it, that it kind of automatically is bringing up, they're having a hard time with not developing some eating disorders once they start
Mm-hmm.
wanting to manage and go down. So, what would be
Yeah.
some advice, number one, in how to pick the correct weight class for
Mm-hmm.
yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And in number two, making sure that we're not, I know obviously healthy practices, but how do we help girls to avoid getting into eating disorders and unhealthy eating practices and habits?
Yeah, those are really, really great questions. So, the first one, choosing the right weight class, the amount of time available to adjust
Hmm.
weight is an important factor.
Yeah,
Developmental age of the athlete starting the sport. You don't want to take somebody in middle school and start cutting them. They're going to end up hating the sport. You
right.
need to give, and they're still developing so rapidly physiologically that they need to not be energy restricted to be able to grow and develop well. So I would say their age has to
Hmm.
be one of the first decision points.
Right.
The second piece would be looking at their their body composition. So if a female athlete has fat mass available to move,
Mm-hmm.
that's the weight we want to move off of them to adjust down to their walking weight. So if that fat mass isn't available in enough quantity to get
Mm-hmm.
them to a healthy walking weight, it's the wrong weight class for them. We cannot take, and we should not be taking female wrestlers. Like they just changed the numbers on this. It used to be 15%. I think it's now
Right.
17.
Yeah.
Because developmentally, 15%, we might start to see changes in their endocrine cycle. So their period and their ability to have a healthy, consistent period, which is key to their
Wow.
development as a woman physiologically, can be disrupted. So if they cannot move, if there is not fat mass available to move and
Mm-hmm.
enough time to move that fat mass off of them, then those are key components in deciding a healthy weight class for that athlete. So
Yeah.
those are those pieces for sure. Um, then that, and obviously too, like her desire to, right? Does
Right.
she
Yeah.
does she want to do that? We don't want to burn these athletes out and make
Absolutely.
them hate the sport
Yeah.
because we're putting them through rigors with their nutrition, which also pulls
Mm-hmm.
into the eating disorder piece. We're
Sure.
putting them into a state and intensity with their nutrition that makes them end up burning out on the sport and not wanting to continue with it, and also potentially developing unhealthy eating habits.
Yeah.
So the disordered eating piece is really, really challenging because a lot of the things we have to do in combat sport feed into the behaviors that can establish disordered eating. So, needing to check your weight, needing to be aware of how much food you're eating before and after, before competition, or like in a tournament during competition as well. That awareness itself can be, if there's an underlying predisposition towards disordered eating, it's going to heighten that. And I think as coaches, what we can do, coaches, parents, is change the language around the food. Instead of making the scale your enemy and food the problem,
Mm-hmm.
your food is your fuel, it's your building material, it's your performance. If you want to show up on the mats and perform well, you have to have those resources in your body to be able to support that strong competition. So
Right.
changing the framework a little bit to encourage that
Yeah.
food, it's not, there's a culture in wrestling that's kind of unfortunate, and it
Yeah.
is fading with more science, but there's this culture that part of the grind is making weight, and like
Right.
the tougher you are and the more you can dive in, like the more of a grindy wrestler you are. And
Yeah.
I kind of like, and you see people see it in like UFC footage and stuff, but there's
Mm-hmm.
so much, and not to throw UFC under the bus, they're actually doing a really great job of putting out really solid information and doing some
Oh
research
wow.
through the
That's
Performance
awesome.
Institute. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still see it in social media, like these big cuts and how that's like part of the badass, excuse me,
No, you're
language. As part of like the grind of the sport. So
yeah.
there's some of that starting to change because we're starting to see, you hear negative like, oh, this athlete was too gassed, or oh, this athlete didn't perform well. Maybe they
Right.
had a hard cut.
Yeah.
So changing some of the language around it to reinforce the fact that food is not your enemy. It is 100% not the enemy of your body or your sport. It is absolutely one of the most important multi-purpose tools that you can and should be utilizing and leveraging to enhance your performance instead of, I have to cut this and get rid of it because this is the enemy of me making weight.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and I think a lot of young women. I know for me especially, it was definitely food felt like an enemy, and I remember having such backwards thinking of when I was young of not understanding nutrition in the slightest. Of okay,
Mm-hmm.
well this this bunch of grapes weighs this much, and this is how much I'm gonna put on, and so it just, I think a lot
Yeah.
of girls and even, boys too, just athletes in general, don't have an understanding of how nutrition is actually impacting and helping their bodies. And it's more
Mm-hmm.
thought of in, these backward ways of, oh, this weighs this much and this is how much I'm going to put on. And so
Mm-hmm.
what would be some of your suggestions? And just number one, maybe let's start with, we're getting ready for a tournament and we're a couple weeks out, and just proper nutrition of, after practices, what that looks like, some snacks athletes should have on hand, all the above of just getting ready for competition.
Yeah. So we always want to keep an eye on being able to support
Mm-hmm.
training and recovery, especially in female athletes. Female athletes do not adapt to training well when there isn't enough energy available in their system. Male athletes can go, again, lower calorie and still adapt to training and recover better. Female
It's so
athletes really
interesting.
can't. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost so just to throw numbers to give you some perspective, like
Yeah.
low energy availability, which is the amount of that the term we use, a relative energy deficit for sport, when an athlete does not have enough fuel energy coming into their body for a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
at what point does their body start to go into distress? And they kind of downshift, and their resting metabolic rate changes, their cardiovascular, their recovery, immune system, everything kind of takes a hit. This is where you see female disturbances in female hormones and periods as well. Male athletes can go to 15 calories per kilogram of lean body mass. So
Okay.
that's the level male athletes can go to,
Right.
and before they start to experience or show signs of distress.
Yeah.
Female athletes is 35 calories
Wow.
per
Holy
kilogram of
cow.
lean body mass. So it's a
That is a
very, very big
huge
difference.
difference.
It's
Yeah.
huge, which is
Yeah.
why we see our female athletes, when we apply the paradigm from male athletes to female athletes, we start to see them falling apart faster.
Yeah.
They just don't tolerate those lower energy intakes well at all.
Right.
So, that
And I
being
feel like
said,
a lot of
go
times,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but I feel like
No.
when that happens, it's like we're attributing it to women just being more emotional than actually the science behind it of they actually can't function at that, at that capacity. So that's kind of crazy that, science backed that is a very big difference between girls and
Very big.
boys. Wow.
Very, very big. And I think that
Yeah.
those numbers help to expand and kind of explode the differences. So coaches say, oh, okay, I get
Yeah.
this.
Right.
And for female athletes, if they're below that 35 grams per kilogram of lean body mass, so 35 calories per kilogram of body mass,
It's
lean
a
body mass,
mouthful.
blah, blah, blah. It, like, if they're below that, the differences too on their lifespan and health span are more detrimental. So
Wow.
the bone density loss, which is a huge driver of female health span,
Yep.
and these young women are in the prime of developing their bone density, and reproductive health. So their
Yeah.
reproductive health can get impaired
Oh
for the
my
long
word.
term. And I
Yeah.
don't know a single coach that would be okay with hearing their female athlete, because they kept them at a weight class that wasn't good for them, came to them 20 years later like, I can't get pregnant. I can't have
Oh,
kids. My
yeah.
endocrine
That would be
system is shot.
heartbreaking. Yeah.
Right? Or, they like finding out that they decided they wanted to start running more, and they're constantly plagued with stress fractures and stress injuries because their bone development was impaired. Nobody
Wow.
wants to put that onto these young athletes. So we have
No.
to understand where the differences are, and we have to help coaches have actionable tools that they
Right.
can use to support these female athletes, and to understand, no, they're not just emotional. you know
Yeah.
you know,
There's
their
something else
bodies are,
going on. Yeah.
yeah, their bodies are literally responding to the stress
Mm,
faster. And if you're applying the male paradigm to a female athlete, you're lighting that stress on fire, because they
wow.
just can't be at that low energy availability, and not for at the level men can go to. The other thing is, females will respond to that stress faster. So we need more energy,
Hmm.
and if we stay low energy, obviously our bodies have metabolic flexibility. So we can have a day or two here or there where we're lower than, what's recommended, and our bodies are fine. When we stay there for too long, that's when we start to go into that relative energy deficit for sport, the red S. Males are subject to this too. The difference is it happens to females sooner than it
Mm,
does males.
mhm.
So we hit low energy availability stress at a higher calorie intake than males do, and we hit it sooner.
Wow.
So, all
That
these
is
things.
That's so interesting to just kind of hear the science behind it of just like the facts of how women and or girls and boys, men and women are different
Mhm.
and how we as coaches have an obligation to, start learning more about it and start approaching, girls in a different way. And so number one, you said that they need to start, have more time for a
Mhm.
weight
Mhm.
descent. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
what are some other things that we need to be doing as coaches to just help coaches and parents and even athletes in making sure that we're managing weight correctly and making sure that
Mhm.
we're fueling body correctly as we're getting ready for competition.
Thank you for circling back. I was like,
Oh
there
yeah,
was an
yeah.
original question in there. I kind of got
Yes,
off the rails
no,
a little
but
bit.
that was perfect. I needed that. That was awesome.
So obviously, we we want to fuel our athletes for their primary training session. A lot of times coaches will look at, a wrestling session as a weight loss session.
Yeah.
And if you're really wanting that athlete to be ready to step on the mats, you have to fuel that session. You can't put a female athlete into a session fasted, or they're going to accumulate too much stress. They're not going to recover from it well. So while they're trying to descend weight, they're not recovering well, and they're going to be more injury prone and more likely to be gassed when they compete. So you have to fuel those sessions. We don't want to use fasted training protocols for female athletes. Male athletes, it's different. They have testosterone that protects them that we don't have in the same volume. So we need to fuel that. So before going into some kind of training, we need the girls to be eating, even if it's a 6 a.m. If they have half a banana or a handful of grapes, just put some energy into your body so that your body, it reduces the stress signaling that it's getting. And then there's energy available to do the training and better capacity to recover. So you want to put some kind of carbohydrate energy. A lot of athletes are very focused, and rightfully so, on proteins.
Sure.
They have an important place at the table, like for real,
Yeah.
but they don't give you energy. Protein's
Right.
more of a building material. So if you're getting ready to go into a training session and you down a protein shake, that's really not going to do anything for you. You
Wow.
need to make sure you're putting carbohydrate energy into your body before you train. The
Okay.
protein can eventually become energy, but not in time for that session. So you
Wow.
want to make sure you're putting carbohydrate energy into your body right
Okay.
before, and preferably the meal before as well, so that there's
Okay.
good energy availability to do the training. And then for females, we do also need a little bit of carbohydrate in our recovery along with our proteins. Males, we can reduce some of the carbohydrate in that recovery window. Females, we need to bookend it. We need a little bit before and a little bit after, so that our bodies, it's all about managing your body's stress response. So, like when you train, you're introducing stress into your body,
Right.
and that stress is where your body goes, okay, if she's going to keep doing this, I need to get better, faster, stronger, and that's a conversion. You're converting that stress into adaptations that make you better, faster, stronger. If there isn't energy available, you're not going to be able to really introduce good stress. And if there isn't energy available after, along with some protein for building material, then you're not going to be able to take that stress and convert it to the adaptations that make you stronger and better. And while you're descending to get to weight to compete, if you're just building up more and more and more and more training stress without converting it into adaptations, you're not bringing everything possible to the mats. You're stepping onto the mats poorly recovered and probably injury prone.
Wow, that is so interesting to just think about. I mean, just this knowledge is so great because even myself, as I'm thinking back of, my competition and just, wow, there's a reason behind why, I wasn't performing the way that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
perform. When a couple weeks out practice wise, I'm feeling fantastic. I'm wrestling my best. And then I do,
Mm-hmm.
a big weight cut and didn't do it properly. And then I, wrestled terribly. And I'm like, man, was it nerves or was it really just, I'm sure that not properly fueling my body played really big into that. So interesting that again the differences between boys and girls, but also just so before practices they need to be having carbs, and even
Mm-hmm.
if it's an early morning practice, some type of carb, and then in the meal before they would also need a carb, and then
Mm-hmm.
afterwards protein, but also carb for girls is
Yeah.
important. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I
incredible.
want to make sure to, I'm focusing a lot on carbohydrates because there's
Sure.
a lot of carbohydrate restriction that goes into making weight, and for good reason. Like it does help your body to move off water weight.
Right.
Um, so people, I don't want to make sure, I want to make sure, you want to make sure you're getting protein too. So I'm
Yeah,
focusing a lot on the
absolutely.
carbohydrates. We need proteins and healthy fats as well. Each meal throughout the day should have consistent protein exposure. So you want to get at least 3 to 4 protein exposures in your day so that you've got good amino acid and protein availability to support the recovery work that you're fueling. So if there isn't building material available in the form of the amino acids, the recovery can get blunted. So, and we like to spread the protein consistently throughout the day because our bodies don't really store a backup reserve of protein. So you want to kind of pulse it through the day so you constantly have building material available to help support that recovery. I really focused on carbohydrate because you were talking about like training, and that's
For
really, we need the
sure.
carbohydrate for training, but
Absolutely.
I don't want to ignore protein because it is also
Okay.
very important, and fats too.
So protein throughout the day in little bursts is
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
helpful, and then your carbohydrates right before your training sessions are what are going to be
Hmm.
important so you can make it through the training session, and then
Hmm.
also to recover you're going to need the protein and the carb as well.
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Got it.
I love it.
Yep.
I'm learning so much. This is amazing. I love it. So, okay, what would you say if we're gonna have like, I mean, as we're getting closer to making weight and
Hmm.
competition,
Hmm.
now having a good descent, what
Hmm.
would be your ideal? Like, if you're helping a girl and making weight, what does that look like do we start restricting towards the end? What does that look like?
So the two variables I almost always use are the hydration and the intestinal weight. So hydration, obviously, we want to start moving a little bit of water weight off of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be, you're consuming a really healthy, good volume of water before you make a water descent. So the
Okay.
reason behind that, we don't want to start a water descent more than like 18 to 24 hours out from making weight because our kidneys will adjust and will stop making as much urine. So if you start
Oh,
trying to dehydrate a couple days out or move water weight off a couple days out, then your kidneys are going to go, I know what's going on. And then you're just going to stop making as much pee. So if you
interesting.
drink a lot of water and then cut it, your kidneys don't know there's not more water coming. So they keep the faucet turned up and you drain the water out a little quicker.
Got
One
it.
of the places this gets glitchy for women is when between ovulation and when we start our period, when our progesterone goes up, we don't drain as much water out of our system. Our bodies
Mm,
hold a little bit more sodium, so we hold more water in our blood volume. So that's where it can get a little bit glitchy. So that's one of the variables we have to pay attention to with
yeah,
female athletes, but we can still move water off of her body. We just can't move it in the same amount that male athletes do. I mean, if you
got
even
it.
talk, I'm sure you saw this with your teammates, like they go to bed and they float 3 or 4 pounds overnight and you're
Right.
like, I floated half a pound.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
yeah, so it's just
That's
different. Our
frustrating.
kid, it is,
Yeah.
and especially when you're comparing because,
Yeah.
but they don't have the progesterone levels that we have. So their bodies and their kidneys, they work differently.
Yeah.
So they do things differently. So there's the water descent. And then the other one is, and with water descent too, we manipulate a little bit of sodium, like a day or two before they have to make weight. We don't want to start cutting sodium 2 weeks out. That's
Yeah.
not good for your nervous system. It is not good for your recovery, and it is completely unnecessary. Your
Got
body
it.
can drain some of that sodium a couple days out. You're good. And then we're not putting you in like danger for being low electrolyte status.
Yeah.
So that's the water piece.
Okay.
And then we have digestive weight. So that's your intestines and literally like your poop, like how much weight you're holding in your
Sure.
intestines. So a
Interesting.
couple of days out, like 3 days out, we start to reduce fiber. So you're eating less fiber. So literally your intestines are not as full of fiber, which also binds to water and holds a little bit more weight. Now, this process really only works if you're eating a healthy, fiber rich diet every other day. Otherwise, you're
Okay.
just creating cement in your intestines that isn't going
Oof.
to move.
Yeah.
So we need to be eating healthy, high fiber, good probiotics, all those things. And then a few days out, we cut the fiber so the intestinal weight goes down. So
Okay.
those are two areas, if done well and balanced, they're pretty safe. I like to leave carbohydrates and fuel alone if I can.
Yeah.
So if an athlete only has to make that 2% descent, then we really don't have to cut as much carbohydrate because we can move that with digestive weight and water. But if they're sitting higher, we have to start to reduce their carbohydrate intake more
Yeah.
and we have to reduce it farther out. So
Okay.
when you eat a carbohydrate, you digest it, absorb it, goes to your bloodstream as glucose, and then it gets stored in your muscle and your liver as glycogen. 1 gram of glycogen is stored with 3 grams of water. So if you're training and exercising and burning off that glycogen
Mm-hmm.
and not intentionally replacing it, then you're draining down how much water and fuel you're holding in that muscle. So it's your intracellular water weight that you're dropping down.
Wow.
Um, Now, why I don't like to touch this if I don't have to
Sure.
is that's your fuel you're using on the mats.
Right.
This is why we see like being too dehydrated
Mm-hmm.
and being too glycogen offloaded, you're going to be gassed on the mats. So I really like to leave that variable alone if we can. But sometimes we still have to, a couple days out, descend the carbohydrate intake a little bit. Part of the reason this is also a problem is that that replenishment of the carbohydrate can take 5 to 6 hours.
Oh,
So it
wow.
takes a while to get that glycogen back into your muscle cell
Right.
efficiently. So, and honestly, it can take to fully reload your muscle can take days. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's what you're using on the mats. So
Right.
we can manipulate that muscle energy fuel resource a little bit, but we don't
Hmm.
want to drain it all the way off, or we're just gonna that's a bad cut.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So ideally, when we're talking to girls about, managing their weight, number one, they shouldn't be sitting over that 2%,
Yes.
ideally,
Hmm.
especially if we're in a season where we're back to back making weight for duels
Hmm.
and tournaments. And then
Yes.
at that point, it's proper weight management in your nutrition. But as you get closer, about 24 to 48 hours is when you could start to do your water cut and cutting
Hmm.
that back, and then also reducing your sodium intake.
Hmm. And fiber.
And fiber, and fiber. Got
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Wow, this
I
is,
like to have at
uh-huh.
least one day of low sodium and high water intake. So you're flushing a little more sodium out of your system. And then after you've had one day of high water intake, low sodium, and then the next day, reduce the water.
Got it. Okay, so that would be like your 3 days out from your making weight is when you would do that
Hmm.
day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, wow. This is such great information and is seriously going to be so helpful for so many people in understanding
I'm
what's
happy
a
to do it.
proper way. Yeah, this is incredible. So now talk about, if you would, about once you do make weight, what does your
Uh-huh.
nutrition look like for like a post weigh-ins, and then
Mm.
your wrestling? What should we be fueling with, and what should that look like so girls are actually properly fueling after weigh-ins?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It gets challenging when you have 2 days. So you have to make weight one day and make
Yep.
weight another day. Again, only further shines a spotlight on choosing a smart weight class. Don't walk around higher than
Right.
2% so that you don't hop up really high and then have to cut again for day two. Because our bodies, when we reintroduce hydration, every wrestler's experienced this. That we hold it, like our
Yeah.
kidneys are now in that, like, oh no, no, this faucet's off because I've been deprived. So
Right.
we're
Yeah.
clamping down, and you're not getting this out of your system.
Seriously.
Um, so again, puts a spotlight on keeping good weight management and not being more than 2% up. So then you make weight.
Hmm.
And then after you've made weight, we want to expedite reloading and refueling your muscles and rehydrating your body as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Most wrestlers have experienced like the bloat and the sloshy
Right.
belly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you've had to really move off a lot of water and you've
Hmm.
dehydrated yourself, your intestines are also dehydrated.
Okay.
And dehydrated intestines don't function well. They don't
Oh,
absorb water and nutrients very quickly or efficiently, which is why a lot of times athletes they'll make weight and they'll hammer all this water and food and then they're blow up like crazy and
yeah.
it's all sitting in their stomachs. And I like to point out that if you feel it sloshing in your stomach and in your intestines, it's not getting into your bloodstream. It's not
Oh,
getting to your
wow.
muscles and organs where it needs to be to support your competition. You've gotten it into your body, but
Right.
it's not getting where it needs to go. So we need to be very intentional
Yeah.
in making sure that our bodies can absorb what we're throwing into it. It's also
That
so we're
makes
not
sense.
miserable and feeling
Yeah.
like our bagel's going to come out
Terrible.
of our nose. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
my first step is always hydrate the gut. Hydrate
Okay.
the gut. So that's, some water, like drink
Uh-huh.
some like 12 ounces of water, or you could do a sugar-free electrolyte. But we don't want to have a lot of sugar or carbohydrate thrown into your intestines immediately
Got it.
because it may not absorb well and it's going to sit in your stomach and slosh around. So we first step is we want to rehydrate the intestines and then like drink that water, maybe wait a beat or two, a couple minutes, and then move into having some really easy to digest carbohydrate energy. So this is sometimes where I introduce like liquid suspension carbohydrates. So I usually use an electrolyte here with sugar in it so that it's really easy to absorb and move that carbohydrate into their system because their body's not having to mechanically break anything down yet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we move to other really easy to digest carbohydrates. So we can go to fruits and things that are continuing to be hydrating, but aren't a ton of work for your stomach to break down. And then after that, step three is moving into really easy to digest carbohydrates. A lot of times I'll throw honey on the fruit too, just to give them a
Mm,
little more boost of
yeah,
carbohydrate energy.
I love that.
Um, and then we move on to more complex carbohydrates that are going to help them feel a little more satisfied and full.
Right.
So some of my athletes really like, a couple of my athletes love pancakes. So they bring
Nice.
pancakes and they use those. Bagels are super easy to use
Mm-hmm.
here. Crackers, pretzels, things that kind of give them a little bit more savory and salty, like kind of
Yeah.
satisfaction. What I like to avoid in these first four steps is fats and proteins.
Okay.
Um, and it is not because there's like, obviously I love fats and proteins. They're very
Right.
important macronutrients, but in this window, our primary goal is getting the carbohydrate digested into your bloodstream and to your muscles as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And if you introduce in this initial reload process, if you're introducing proteins and fats, both of those macronutrients digest slower and it
Mm,
will slow down the transit time of the carbohydrates from your stomach to your intestines to your bloodstream.
wow.
So, but that's just the initial reload.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So after you've done that, and like you have your first match, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, have a turkey
Okay.
sandwich, start introducing some of those proteins and fats, and like totally okay to have on competition day, just not that really initial reload
Yeah.
process.
Wow, that's so interesting. And again, I'm just wishing that I had this information when I was competing because I'm like, wow, the way that I was doing things so wrong is just so
Mm,
highlighted. And also as a coach, seeing how, your athletes were refueling, and for me, just not having necessarily the bandwidth to be able to not necessarily manage what they're doing, but to, when you have 30, 40 girls that are rest, because I had a pretty big team, I couldn't go
mm,
around and be like, hey, why are you eating this? And again,
yeah.
I think for me right there, even that thought of why are you eating this? What would be some better ways that coaches and parents
Mm.
could go about talking to girls about their food without actually like shaming them and making
Oh
them
yeah.
because sometimes for me I'd have my dad, if I'm eating a snack at night and I wanted a little bit of ice cream or whatever it is,
Hmm, hmm.
if he wanted to approach me and have a comment of like we shouldn't be having that or whatever it was when I'm trying to manage my weight, then that
Hmm.
further pushed me away from him and also made it so I'm like, well, now I want to eat the whole thing of ice cream just because you
Yeah.
told me, you know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
that those habits that I've recognized in my own journey are things that
Hmm.
probably girls have picked up along the way too. So,
Hmm.
like I said, what would be some things that we could tell parents and coaches that would help them to be able to have positive relationships with their athletes and food?
Okay. So definitely would encourage like education. So
Yeah,
a lot of athletes, they train, they put a lot of effort and energy into becoming the best possible athlete that they can become.
right.
And if they understand how to use it, how food is one of those really important levers that they have control over and that they can use to help empower themselves and how they can use it, I think is really, really helpful. So, because right now, a lot of times, just culturally, for us, food is just that moment of pleasure when we put something in our mouth.
Yeah,
But and healthy food and functional foods can have all of that too, but
sure.
understanding the why behind not having like a milkshake right after you make weight, well,
Yeah,
because you probably won't feel as good. You can have it later, but not now. So having those pieces and the other piece, so understanding how the carbohydrates work in their body so they know why and when to choose them and how to use those multi-purpose tools, how the proteins work, how the fats work. I think all of that can help them on their own self-advocate
right.
for healthy nutrition and start to create a team culture around that language. And so turning, instead of it being food, it's fuel. Hey,
Yeah.
have you gotten some fuel for your match?
Oh, I love that.
So, and instead of it being like, don't eat protein, eat this. Like, well, where's your fuel? What's your fuel? Your fuel's carb. Okay, so have your protein, but make sure you're getting some fuel too.
Right.
So those pieces and changing a little bit of that language. Now, when it
That's so
comes to
good.
foods that
I
are
love that.
not, oh, I'm glad, I'm
Yeah,
glad.
these are really
Um,
helpful things. I wish I would have, again, thinking back, like these are great things that
no.
you can tell to, your girls and just making it just a simple change in words. That's huge. I love that.
Yeah, and we've learned these lessons the hard way. So
Right.
your generations come through and we've learned a lot of things
Sure.
that now we get to reach back to these younger generations and pour better information into them,
Yeah,
empower them while the sport is exploding, and these
absolutely.
girls can have a more successful experience as a person and as an athlete.
That's so
Um,
good. Sorry, I didn't mean to
a-
cut you off. Sorry. My
it's
brain.
okay. I gotta. My brain's holding onto the ice cream really, really hard right now to make sure I address that.
Right.
Um, so one of the things I get apprehensive of is creating foods that are forbidden,
Yeah,
because I think creating those forbidden foods creates more desire and binge habits.
absolutely.
So what I normally try and work with my athletes, and I joke with them, but it's not a joke. I'm like, if you want a chocolate chip cookie every night, then we just adjust your nutrition so you can have your chocolate chip cookie. It's
Right.
carbohydrate, so we adjust your carbohydrate. It goes into that pool. We're good. Um,
Wow.
so that the food stops becoming this is good, this is bad,
Yes.
because that has a really, especially in these young developing young girls, it can have a really derailing negative effect. So we hear
Absolutely.
enough about how these foods are bad in popular culture.
Yeah.
Um, if we can take some of the edge off of that for them, I think that that would be really helpful. So, if you're like to reframe the interaction with you and your dad. So, hey, you really like having ice cream at night, right? Well, yeah, I like to have a little bit of ice cream at night. It's summer. It just feels good. I'm going out with my friends. Okay, why don't we just kind of adjust some things through your day so that you can still have that and manage your weight okay? Do you feel comfortable with
Mm.
that? And just
Wow.
approach it in that aspect so that
Yeah.
the athlete doesn't feel like I've got to hide that I'm going to crumble cookie and I feel so ashamed that I'm eating this. And like, no,
Yeah.
go. Just either plan for it or compensate for it. Or if it happens once in a month and you're just in weight management, I mean, obviously going to crumble cookie 2 days out from making weight, that's going to
Right.
be a difficult thing to
Right.
compensate for.
Not
But if you're
ideal. Yeah.
doing, yeah, if you're having a treat like that once a month during a descent, it's not going to have a devastating impact on that descent. But if it's something like for you, if it was you like to have a little bit of ice cream every night,
Right.
okay, well, let's build your nutrition around making that happen so that you don't feel ashamed. I mean, ice cream's got protein, it's got calcium, it's got healthy fats in it. It's got good electrolytes in it. There's other things in the ice cream. It's not a
Yeah.
shameful food. Let's make
Right.
it work.
Yeah, I love that. That's seriously so great because I will admit I have a sweet tooth and ice cream at night is a is something that I enjoy, but I have, I've learned as I've gotten older that for me if I categorize things like you said as good and bad, that's when I start to
Mhm.
go into those more binge habits of, I just
Yeah.
want to go off the rails with eating, 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 and then I'm going to restrict because I feel
Mhm.
bad about myself.
Yep.
And so, being able to incorporate in those things that I really enjoy, but then overall
Mhm.
making sure that what I'm eating is whole healthy food that's fueling my body correctly,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
what I've been able to put into my life a little bit better. I'm still not perfect, but it has gotten better over the years. So I love how you reframe that conversation that I had with my dad, and he's fantastic. He's great. And again, he's just a supportive parent that wanted to, help me
Yeah.
towards my goals. So I love how you were
Mhm.
able to reframe that conversation in a way that would have been more beneficial and not, pushed a daughter away. So
Yeah.
that's incredible. I love that. And I'm curious, you said as you're working with your athletes, adjusting carbs and stuff, do you have
Mhm.
them tracking things on apps or having them, like, is there a specific way you go about tracking nutrition?
That is a really, really good question. And I kind of play that one on a client by client basis
Okay,
because the
yeah.
apps can become disordered in themselves
Yes,
and
absolutely.
athletes can become falsely rewarded for coming in under. It
Mm,
really, really, really depends on the athlete. Um,
sure.
I do like them for at least a brief period of time as an education process. So you
Okay.
understand when I want to put together a meal that meets these macros, this is visually what it looks like.
Yeah.
And once you kind of educate yourself with that, kind of change the visual perspective of what the plate should look like, then you can sometimes start to let the apps go.
Okay.
Um, but some athletes really like having the apps to keep them on track. And it's
Sure.
a really positive, empowering, proactive, helps them have lots of variety. They can go out to eat and they don't worry about what they're eating because they can put it into the app and they're still hitting their macros appropriately.
Yeah.
So that one's a little bit of a mixed bag, and I kind of use it on a client by client basis. So
Yeah.
sometimes they'll use apps. I do with my private practice clients and some of my team athletes. We do write up meal plans, and a lot of my
Okay.
athletes, when they're in season, um, they really like repetition because it takes
Mm,
away some of the anxiety. So they like
yeah.
to have a couple meal plans that they work from, and that's just pretty much what they stick to. And then we kind of work on some diversity and changing things up a little bit outside of season.
Okay.
So in those meal plans, they're given like how many ounces of specific types of foods, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, they're supposed to be eating, what times of
Right.
day they're supposed to be eating it. So they use those plans, and then it just kind of becomes habit
Yeah.
after a while. And then by the end of season, they're usually ready for a little bit of variety. But honest, every time I try and introduce a variety, I'm like, are you getting sick of your foods? Like,
Yeah.
do you want to punch your rice? Like, tell me what's
Right.
going on. Are you okay with your
That's
foods?
hilarious.
And they're like, yeah, I'm getting a little tired of rice, but I don't want to change anything yet. I don't want to change anything yet.
Oh, wow.
A lot of my athletes really like the comfort of like, my weight's good. I'm
Yeah.
competing well and I'm making weight comfortably. I don't want to
Right.
change anything up.
Yeah.
So,
That's
so we do
amazing.
use meal plans. Some people need more variety, and there are the people I
Sure.
really like to use the apps for.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense because then it's probably easier to introduce that variety to them without, going too out of the bounds of things. I love that.
Mm,
And I think it's great that you mentioned that it can be a tool used, appropriately, but it also can be a tool for some that it
mm,
might not be great for. Because just like you mentioned for myself, I'm using myself as an example a lot just because I myself have dealt with struggling with my nutrition. And so for me, I know as soon as I do introduce like an app and tracking things, then it becomes more of like a disordered thing of like it puts too much into my brain of what we're focusing on. Where my husband does great with it. He loves tracking his stuff and it's fantastic for him. So I love that you've been
mm,
able to figure out it's a client by client thing or it's a case by case thing of what works good for you.
yeah.
I'm really curious. We've got, about 10 minutes left, but I want to talk about, if you could give girls an idea of maybe like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner and some snack options, what are some great, quick, good grabs for girls to be focusing on good, full nutrition meals?
Sure. So if we're going to keep it super general, then what we'd want to look at is a basic kind of performance plate where around a quarter to a third of your plate is protein, around a third of your plate is energy dense carbohydrates in the form of like rice, pasta, potatoes, the dense carbohydrates. And then a third of your plate is plant-based nutrition, so fruits and vegetables. Okay,
Okay.
so just a basic performance plate like that is a really, really good place to start
Yeah.
and will most likely meet most of your needs throughout the day. So for breakfast, you could put eggs, yogurt, protein shakes as an option for your protein, and then obviously you can have bread, toast, oats, cereal for your carbohydrate, and then some fruits.
Okay.
Lunch, we could do, your carbohydrate could be a wrap, like the tortilla with your
Yeah.
protein, and you could put some vegetable in it and a piece of fruit on the side.
Okay.
And dinners, like rice, sweet potato, one of my favorite options to use because it's so fiber dense and nutrient dense. I always
Oh
ask my clients,
yeah.
but I put sweet potatoes on the plan. So for the energy dense carbohydrates, any proteins, so fish, beef, pork, chicken. If you're vegan or vegetarian, then vegetarian's a little easier to do as a combat athlete than vegan. So you could use eggs, tofu, things like that as well for your proteins. And I got to make sure the plant-based nutrition. Okay, we focus so much on the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, which we should. The macronutrients are important, but your body's ability to adapt and recover is more efficient if you have good nutrient density. So vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all of those things that we get rich resources from plants. And also that fiber that keeps you from
Yeah.
building up the cement in your intestines.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
getting a lot of that from our plants. So we want to make
Got it.
sure we don't forget those. I see my guys walking in all the time at Lehigh with their rice and their chicken, and I'm like, where's the veg? like, like,
Hilarious.
please just throw some broccoli in
Yeah.
there. So,
I love that. That's awesome.
yeah.
And actually, speaking to that too, those are some really great options. I'm curious, talking about like supplements, if is that something
Mm-hmm.
that you recommend for girls or athletes in general, or
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like they should be getting it all from the nutrition that they have from food?
Um, I'm a food first, but not food only
Got it.
practitioner. We
Okay.
want to start with good quality ingredient based foods, minimally processed as much as possible. Obviously, families are busy, athletes are very busy, and so sometimes we have to use things that like are packaged bars and things like that.
Yeah.
But as often as possible, we want to use whole foods, so we're getting as much
Mhm.
nutrient density from our nutrition as possible. But then we're asking our bodies to do a lot as
Yeah.
athletes. And very few people are so perfectly spot on with their nutrition that they're not that they're getting every micronutrient that their bodies need, especially when they're training really, really hard
Yeah.
and growing and developing and recovering. So I do usually recommend supplementation. And then for women, there's different phases like between ovulation and starting our period. Our uterus can be kind of greedy for some
Okay.
minerals, magnesium and zinc.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, the rest of our body doesn't get the magnesium and zinc. So supplementing, and you can supplement it every day, not just during that high hormone phase, but having
Yeah.
that supplementation can kind of help cover some of the gaps that we can feel in recovery and things like that when we're in high hormone phase.
Yeah, that's great. So is this like a case by case thing too that you look at somebody and you recommend supplements based off of
Mhm.
kind of them, or do you have a recommendation for athletes or women across the board for what's good supplements to be taking?
I do kind of have a basic stack that I recommend for
Okay.
all of my athletes, but they have
Yeah,
particular benefits to women.
sure.
A good omega-3, so a good fish oil, so that they're
Okay.
getting at least 1 gram of DHA, EPA combined per day. A lot of the symptoms that we can feel in high hormone phase when our bodies are sore, our joints hurt, is our inflammation driven. So if we're taking omega-3s on a regular basis, it can drive down some of that inflammation, improve recovery time. It's also really good for neurological development, which I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
having little ones, I'm sure you've seen
Yes.
that in the
Yes, I
data.
have.
So all of that, I mean, unless you come from a family that eats a fatty fish a couple times a week, like a good wild caught salmon and cod, things like that, then most people don't.
Yeah.
So supplementing a good omega-3 is something I recommend across the board.
Yeah.
Um, it helps with cellular development, neurological development, all kinds of really beneficial things, and then mitigating some of the side effects we can feel when we're in that difficult phase of our cycle.
Oh, wow, that's
Another
great.
one is vitamin D. D is in dog. Now, this one I tend to stay conservative with until I've seen blood work.
Okay.
So I usually recommend around 2,000 for fully grown. So pediatric is 5,000 IU dose. Um, More developed, 2,000 IU is a good dose. But if somebody's deficient, then we
Mm,
want to give them a higher dose of vitamin D because it does help with bone development. It helps with neurological development. It helps support their immune system. I mean, vitamin D just is a fantastic multi-purpose tool for your entire body. So if you're deficient, you need to get that number up. Um, and then the other one that I just pretty universally recommend is
okay.
magnesium glycinate, because it is beneficial for, again, when your uterus is being kind of greedy and we
Yeah.
need it for muscle recovery. We're keeping our levels up. It can also just generally improve muscle recovery and also help with sleep quality because it
Oh,
helps to kind of
wow.
calm your nervous system a little bit. So taking it at night before sleep can help. The one that I definitely check levels on, and I try and get levels on every female athlete I work with if possible, is ferritin. So,
Okay.
because we bleed monthly, we lose more blood and
Yep.
iron than our male counterparts do. So, it is very common for women to run low in ferritin. And what ferritin is, it's the iron storage protein. So you're not officially like categorized as anemic because your blood iron levels are okay, but your storage protein is low. And we can be symptomatic as female athletes when our iron storage is low. We can
Oh,
have
wow.
fatigue, reduced recovery, can negatively impact bone development. So it's another important one to check. However, I don't ever put somebody on an iron supplement unless I've checked their ferritin first
Mm,
because iron can be
okay.
a little bit rough. So I want to make sure your listeners are hearing this just because I'm saying we typically run a little low. Know your numbers before you start taking it because if you're in a good range, you don't need or you shouldn't be taking iron if you're in a good range. If you are low, you should be supplementing.
Those are such great suggestions. I love that so much. And you've been such an amazing resource. Like all this information is incredible. And I want to keep like re-listening to this conversation because there's been
You're
so many
sweet.
wonderful nuggets. Like this is amazing. For you, really quick on the supplements, is there,
Mm-hmm.
because supplements, like there's, debate about regulation and all the different
Mm-hmm.
things. Is there specific brands that you recommend for supplements?
Mm-hmm. I like anything that carries the NSF certification, certified
Okay.
NSF Sport certified. It's third party tested, clean from any potential cross contamination, and also verified that what is listed on the label is what's in the package. So
Wow.
I recommend Thorne pretty consistently. They have a great line that's NSF certified. They're not their entire product line, but they do have one that one sport specific line that is NSF certified for sport. And if you have anybody competing at a higher level,
Hmm.
then they need to make sure that they're using third party tested. Designs for Sport is another one that is NSF certified. Clean Athlete is also NSF certified. So there's a lot of products out there, and yeah, there's a lot of issues with regulation, but be a smart consumer and get one that they've had the third party testing done and you know what you're getting is good and clean.
This is amazing. Seriously, you've been so incredible, and I'm just so grateful that
Oh,
we've been able to have this conversation. You have so much knowledge, and I just, yeah, I just want to keep picking your brain. This is incredible. So, two things that I want to end with is number one, what would be your biggest takeaway that you would give to listeners, girls, coaches, parents, all the things, and then also I want people to be able to reach out to you and use you as a resource. So if you could just kind of finish with where we can reach out to you, how athletes and parents and just what you have available so that people can actually use you as a resource.
oh, thanks. Sure. So, biggest takeaway, don't see food as your enemy. It's not. It is absolutely one of the most powerful multi-purpose tools that you have for your sport, your performance, your health, and your development. It is not the enemy. So it is a lever that you have control over, that you can empower yourself and have agency to build performance and health. So don't see it as the enemy. It is 100% not the enemy. It is a performance tool.
I love that.
And to contact me, I do have a website,
Okay.
ES Performance Nutrition.
Okay.
And then you can contact me through the website. I'm also on socials, so you can find me on Instagram at Erin Sparrold, and same thing with Facebook. I'm
Okay.
old, so I'm still on Facebook. So
Hey, I'm on there too.
that's where a
It's
lot of the
okay.
moms. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm gonna tag all of those in the
Okay.
podcast description so everybody can find you. And in what capacity do you offer, like, do you offer things for just athletes, or do you work with parents, coaches? What do you offer?
So I do team coaching.
Okay.
So that involves like all different levels of team coaching. So I have different tiers. So I've got the top tier is regular weight tracking, one-on-one sessions with the athletes, and lots of education. A second tier is mostly education for the team,
Hmm.
and presentations for the team. And then the
Yeah.
third tier is just basic presentations, just coming
Hmm.
in, giving the team some education, some resources to help move the culture a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's the different ways I work with teams, but then I also
Awesome.
do work in private practice. So I do
Okay.
have athletes that I take in and we go through, your health history, your performance history, your competition timeline, and then we develop maintenance plans for you. We develop weight descent plans that work for you. So how many days out do you start moving your water? When do you move your carbohydrate? How much carbohydrate do you need to move? How do you recover? Giving them specific grams of carbohydrate that they need in that reloading window, because it is different obviously for a
Right.
90 pounder and a 200 pounder. So giving them
Wow.
very specific outlines like that to follow so that they're empowered and they know what to do. I find that not having that information, the usual reaction is to over restrict
Yeah.
because they're so concerned about not making weight that they over restrict their nutrition. So I think it's so important to give them structure, and then they
Absolutely.
trust the process so they know, wow, I can actually eat this much and
Right.
still make
Yeah.
weight
Right.
instead of over restricting. Yeah.
That's incredible. I absolutely, if I was still competing, would reach out to you and have you build me a program because this is incredible, and the knowledge that you have is just seriously it's amazing. So thank you so much for taking
Mm-hmm.
the time to share with me, and hopefully I know this is going to benefit so many listeners. So I really appreciate your time, and
I'm happy to
I
do
would
it.
say yeah, absolutely. And I would really recommend those that are listening to reach out and to use you as a resource, and especially to use this podcast. Listen through it again because this was fantastic. So thank you again, Erin, and you're doing so many wonderful things for the sport of women's wrestling and just for people in general. So thank you for who you are and taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for an opportunity to help empower more women. I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast and follow along for weekly episodes.